This is a big one. This is what you see a lot. And the most common is Australopithecus. Australo means southern. Like Ken says, he's from the deep south, Australia. And Pithecus means ape. I got a question for you. Whatever else we can say about Australopithecus, it is an ape. Evolutionists themselves call it an ape, Pithecus. Okay, let's look at it. Well, the famous one is Lucy. There are other specimens, not as complete as Lucy. These are the bones that were found in Lucy. And she was scheduled to spend 6 years in America going to 10 different museums being on display. Many museums refused to even accept the exhibit. They said they were putting this rare skeleton in too much danger to bring it over. So a lot of museums boycotted, including some of our major museums in the country. But they brought her over, and there were enough museums to at least show her. The whole show was called Lucy's Legacy, Hidden Treasures of Ethiopia, and it cost you $25 to venerate ape bones. From Houston, she went to Seattle. But before we go on to Seattle, let's look what they had at Houston. I got on their website. I knew the teachers were going to be bringing children through in the grade schools by the thousands, so I kind of wanted to know, what are they telling the teachers? So there was a place called the pre-field trip, post-field trip, Lucy and Anthropology for the elementary school. And this is what the teachers were told. First of all, this was not for the students, this was just for the teachers. For many years, Lucy was thought to be a direct human ancestor, but we now see her as belonging to a separate group of hominids from those that became our species. What? What do you know so far? She's not your relative. Isn't this what it's saying here, basically? Okay, look at the next sentence. This says, you're going to blow you away. Lucy remains the benchmark by which all other discoveries are judged. So it's not your relative, but it's the gold standard of all the ape men. This is as good as it gets. Man alive, were they in trouble or what with Lucy? In fact, we built our Lucy display. It took 2 years to build it, and I was just worried sick during the whole 2 years that they were going to just throw Lucy out. The evidence is so dreadful. And we'd be sitting with a white elephant, and nobody believes in it anymore, and we got a $100,000 exhibit. But I should have known, evolutionists never throw anything away. They haven't thrown the recapitulation myth away. I mean, they just keep everything. So anyway, what do the little kids get in the elementary school? This is where the science comes in. You'll see where your tax dollars are going. And you'll see why you have to be an evolutionist to be, according to Bill Nye, the science guy, you have to be an evolutionist to do almost anything, be an engineer or even a stand-up comic, which is what he spent a good part of his career doing. Here's what it said on the website for the teachers. The big question addressed with the kids is, when and why did our ancestors start walking upright? Notice no child is given the opportunity to discuss, did we have ancestors that didn't walk upright? Let's just assume. We're not going there. We're not going to allow that kind of discussion. Any child that brings it up, So when and why did our ancestors start walking upright? Okay, here's where the science comes in. I hope you can follow. It gets pretty deep. Put the students in groups of 2. Number each student 1 or 2. I'm not going too fast, am I? I didn't think so, no. Ask student number 1 to put his hands on the floor and walk on all 4 limbs around the classroom. So you got the picture, student number 1 on all 4s round and round the classroom. For a teacher's website, the instructions aren't very clear, but I gather student number 2 got to walk on 2 legs, probably following after student number 1, watching him struggle on the floor on 4 limbs. Now, why did they do that? Because this is hard science. This is experimental science. When you get all done, presumably when number 2 collapses in pain on the floor, you are then to discuss with your partner, would you rather walk on 2 legs or 4? This is closely related to the question, would you like a sharp stick in the eye? I mean, and then here's the real kicker here. Why do you think apes began walking on 2 legs? Can't you just imagine student number 2? Man, it really hurts walking on all 4. Well, there's your answer right there. It really hurt walking on 4. That's why they got up on 2. This you can teach. You can't teach creation. You can't even be critical of this. They even forbid the scientific criticism because they say until you get to college, a teacher's not qualified to disagree with the authorities in the textbooks and what have you. That's a legal decision. Well, there she is again. Lucy was discovered in Ethiopia in 1974, confidently dated at 3 million years, but her dates have gone all over the page, just current reading on that. They say the bones are 40% complete. Do the math. There's 207 bones in Lucy's skeleton, typical of a primate. And they have found about 47 bones. Make it 20%, you're closer. She's lacking most of the foot bones and hand bones, fingers, and well, one finger. But there are other specimens believed to be Australopithecus afarensis that include these bones. There's a whole group of about 16 called a first family. So this is the skeleton. In St. Louis, they made this model. So we made our model, they made their model. Remember, Lucy's about 3 foot, 1 inch tall, so don't get the feeling that this is a 5 footer or anything like that. They usually make her that tall, but really, the creature, according to the bones, are about a little over 3 feet. The head is clearly ape-like, but from the neck on down, it's absolutely human. The trunks, breasts, genitalia, arms, hands, legs, feet, posture, gait, and pensive gaze. She's obviously had model training. She knows that if you point the toe, it extends the leg. And look at those legs. You ever see an ape with legs like that? There's few enough ladies with legs like that. You have legs like that, you shave them, you could be in one of these Hanes stocking ads or something. But isn't it sad? Absolutely human till you get to the neck and then an ape head. Oh, bummer, right at the last moment. And look at, do you have any idea what she's doing? She's thinking. You see, again, the artist conveys something that's not there in the fossils, but she's deep in thought. I've kind of figured she's saying something like, I don't have a thing to wear, but could be wrong in that. And look at those hand bones. You could in the fingers, you could play classical guitar, keyboard, absolutely human hands. Fingers a little longer than average, but human hands. Oh, and look at the whites in the eyes, see? This is standard. You won't find an ape man doesn't have a white sclera. Not in an evolution museum. Before this statue was made, or this model in St. Louis, Stern and Sussman, who are evolutionists, published a paper in the American Journal of Anthropology in which they showed Lucy had highly curved fingers capable of tree-dwelling primates. So in other words, she had meat hooks out here. Suspensory adapted, curved. Another line of evidence that she was suspensory adapted is the shoulder. If you lift your arm, you really can't go any higher than this joint. It won't allow it. And it's called the glenoid fossa, because it's like a glen, a shallow thing. You think, wait a minute, I can lift my arm up here. Anything higher than this, the muscles on your back here have to rotate the scapula. And you can feel this. Have somebody raise their arm. You put your fingers, this bone is close to the skin, the spine of the scapula. Put your fingers in there, you won't feel the thing up to here, but from here on up, you'll feel it start to turn. So tree-dwelling creatures have an up-tilted glenoid fossa. So their arms can be way up here before the muscles have to start rotating the scapula. Lucy has the up-tilted glenoid fossa. She has hook-like fingers. I mean, is it starting to maybe suggest been in a tree once in a while? This was really the killer. Richmond and Strait in Nature of 2000, March 23, 2000, said Lucy had wrists capable of locking the hands in place during knuckle walking. We actually cite this reference in our exhibit, so if somebody gets all upset as they are over our putting Lucy knuckle walking instead of Marine drill sergeant posture, take a look. What do you think? This is not a creationist. What are they seeing to indicate knuckle walking? If you extend the hand like this, the carpal bones, these little bones in the wrist, they kind of group or compact together, and it locks the wrist so you can support the weight of the knuckles. If you tried to walk on your knuckles, you'd very quickly be down on your hands. Couldn't support the weight in the knuckle. We lock our knees, by the way. You know, when you stand at attention, you kind of give it that extra, like that. And once you're in that position, you can stand for 2 or 3 hours until some rascal comes along and clips you right behind the knees. They unset the lock. The lock is really achieved by a muscle in the back of the knee, back here, that goes diagonally across, and it rotates just a couple degrees, and that sets the lock. So we have locking knees, whereas Lucy has no locking knees. She has locking wrists. Once again, what we'd expect from an ape. So our Lucy is knuckle walking. Hope you've all had a chance to see her. And we believe this is a much closer representation of what she might have looked like than certainly the St. Louis exhibit. And then look at the feet they put on Lucy. You ever see feet like that? Kick off a shoe, you'll see feet like that. And hairy, but human feet. What do we know for sure? She didn't have human feet. Again, Stern and Sussman show curved toes, big toe standing out, heavily muscled foot. So people are just ignoring the evidence. They always put human feet on Lucy. They ignore the bones we have. They just go ahead and put human feet on. The brown are the original bones. The white is their interpretation. They just go ahead and put human feet on. Why? Look, in 1996, they finally get the hands right. It took all those years to get them to finally put the hands that we knew were there with the curved fingers, but still the human feet. They're there because the Laetoli footprints found by Mary Leakey actually a year before they found Lucy. And these footprints represent at least two individuals. You see left-right stride, and this goes on for 73 feet. So this is not just an occasional footprint we're looking at here. And next to it is a smaller individual who obviously is increasing their stride to keep up with the bigger individual. I heard Mary Leakey give a lecture on this at Washington University shortly after she discovered it. And she said in her lecture that, this is just amazing that these feet would be identical to the appearance of human feet. In fact, one of the evolutionists at the time, Tim White, who was an expert on fossil feet, says any child looking at it would know that it was just like what they saw on the beach. I mean, clearly human, with a well-developed arch. I mean, look at this foot. Well-developed arch here, toe goes straight ahead, doesn't splay out. The smaller toes cling to the ground. And even the stride, we have a unique stride. The heel hits first, the weight goes out to the little toe, comes across, you push off with the big toe. There's no other creature that walks that way. So they got all this evidence. So I had the chutzpah to ask Mary Leakey personally, since they're virtually identical to human footprints, why not consider the possibility that they're human footprints? And in that tone of voice that the English reserve in teaching and talking to colonists, she said, "Ooh, but surely you must know there were no humans around 3 million years ago." Well, settles that. I don't care if they find a caddy coupe de ville down here, there were no humans around. I get asked all the time, how come we don't find human fossils in old strata? We do. You see what happens to them? They either say they're not human or it's not that old. If you're confused, here's an ape foot and a human foot. You can sort things out on your own. Finally, well, not finally, but penultimately, humans are knock-kneed. If you look at Yorick here, put his feet together, you see how the femurs converge? So we're knock-kneed. That's good. If our legs were perfectly straight, our feet would be as far apart as our hips. And then as soon as you started to walk, you'd fall in that direction. So most apes have straight legs. And you say, well, then why don't they fall down? Well, they throw the weight over the planted foot. So when they lift their left foot, they throw their weight over this one. When they lift their right foot, they throw the weight over this one. See if this looks familiar to you. That's an ape walk. That's one of two reasons they walk that way. And in humans, it's about 8 degrees. They claim on Lucy it's up to 15. So the human is 9, whereas a gorilla is 0, straight-legged chimp is 0. But here's where you have to learn to be critical. You need to ask the teacher, Miss Jones, are there any apes that have a carrying angle? Hey, glad you asked. The orangutan has 9 degrees, just like the human. The spider monkey has 9 degrees. Nobody says they're becoming human, nor do they walk like a human. What are they doing with this carrying angle? They're walking on limbs and trees. They're tight wire walkers. I'll give you a first lesson in tight wire walking. You want to keep your feet together, right? Do not try like this. This is not going to work. So the carrying angle doesn't prove anything. Finally, Lucy's hips. You cannot walk like a human with ape hips. These are ape hips. What's the difference? Well, here's our chimp that we have in our display case up there. Notice the iliac blades, which are these things here. They're kind of under your belt here. The iliac blades go straight out on each side. There's a very important muscle attached to that blade that goes to this bump called the greater trochanter. That's this bump right here. On a chimp, that muscle's running down the back, isn't it? And what it does is a chimp has a posture, all apes have a posture, that's bent forward and bent at the knees. Their problem is falling on their face, and this gluteus medius muscle pulls them back by extending at the hip. Humans have the same type of hip, same muscle called the gluteus medius, but we use it in a very different way. Let me show you. This is the human hip. And the iliac blades curve around. I always liken it to ape hips are like scooter handlebars, and human hips are like tricycle handlebars that come out like this, so you can drive your tricycle like this, steer. Now, what's important is the gluteus medius attaches right here where you see this, the red and blue is where muscles attach. Attaches right here and goes down to the greater trochanter. If this muscle contracts, look what happens. It abducts the leg. So if I exercise my gluteus medius, this happens. Now, we don't do this kind of thing too often in life unless there's a dance I'm not familiar with. But what we do is every time we lift our left leg, our left hip ought to collapse because these are ball socket joints. You got a ball socket joint here, a ball socket joint here, lift this leg, this is going down. It would, except the gluteus medius on the right contracts, and instead of abducting your leg, it keeps your hips level. When I lift my right leg, then the left gluteus medius contracts. And so our ability to walk without waddling from side to side is based on having the gluteus medius in this configuration. It does not extend like it does in an ape. So the big question is, you can't walk like a human unless you have hips like that. What kind of hips does Lucy have? And the hips are ape hips. Well, I've pretty much told you what you need to know from an anatomical view, that Lucy is another ape. Why is this important? Probably seen this figure before. If we have Adam in our past, and he's our ancestor, then our absolutes come from God, and God sets the rules. Huh? We're accountable to him, basically. Whereas we have ape in our past, all morality becomes relative, and man sets the rules. Two very different views. And these have real implications. Have you heard of Jeffrey Dahmer? He engaged in somewhat questionable behavior. He ate people. I saw this guy when he had this interview with Stone Phillips on TV. He was absolutely rational. He was a very bright, very articulate young man. Most mothers would be just delighted if their daughter were to date somebody like Jeffrey Dahmer, except he ate people, killed them. And look what he said on the Stone Phillips Dateline NBC, November 29, 1994. If a person doesn't think there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point?